I'm Audrey, 32 female. I'm an architect, a woman who builds dreams from concrete, steel, and glass. My life is about structure, precision, and finding beauty in the lines that connect everything. For the past 5 years, I've shared that life with Liam, a civil engineer whose love for solid foundations matches my own love for elegant designs. But the most important project I ever designed, my own wedding, was almost demolished by the one person I should have been able to trust most, my sister. This is the story of how her greed forced my parents to choose between their daughters, and how a single, child-free rule at my wedding reception uncovered a betrayal so shocking it fractured our family forever. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The scent of sawdust and fresh paint was my version of perfume. My office, a clean, minimalist space downtown, was my sanctuary. Blueprints lay across my desk like maps to future worlds, each line a promise of something new. Liam understood this passion completely. His work was the invisible strength that held up my visible art, the rebar within the concrete, the deep pilings that anchored skyscrapers to the earth. We were a team in every sense of the word, and our wedding was meant to be the cornerstone of the life we were building together. We'd been planning it for over a year, with the same meticulous care we'd put into a multi-million-dollar construction project. Every detail was chosen with intention. Our venue was a restored art gallery called the Atrium. It was a masterpiece of industrial chic design, with soaring ceilings, exposed brick walls, and a magnificent glass roof that allowed moonlight to spill onto the polished concrete floors. It was sophisticated, elegant, and decidedly adult. That was the point. We envisioned an evening of quiet romance, of heartfelt conversations with our dearest friends and family, of clinking champagne glasses and slow dancing under the stars filtering through the glass. For that reason, we made the difficult but necessary decision for our wedding to be a child-free event. It wasn't a judgment on parenthood. It was a choice about the specific atmosphere we wanted for one night. We included a politely worded note on the invitations and our wedding website, explaining our decision and offering to help arrange local babysitting for our out-of-town guests. Most of our friends, many of them parents themselves, understood completely. They texted us things like, "Thank you for the excuse for a date night," and "Can't wait to celebrate with you both without worrying about a toddler." Everyone understood, that is, except for my older sister, Megan. Megan was 3 years my senior, and she lived in a world that felt perpetually chaotic. She was a part-time real estate agent, but her primary role was being a mother to her 3 children, 9-year-old twins, Josh and Caleb, and 7-year-old Lily. To put it mildly, her children were a force of nature. They weren't just energetic, they were destructive whirlwinds. The last time they'd visited my apartment, Josh had used a permanent marker to draw a superhero on my cream-colored sofa, and Lily had watered my prized orchid with a full bottle of orange juice. Megan's response was always the same, a weary sigh and a half-hearted, "Oh, kids will be kids." She never disciplined them, never made them apologize, and certainly never offered to pay for the damages. Liam and I had long since adopted a policy of meeting Megan and her family only in public, preferably outdoors. When she received her invitation, the call came within minutes. Her tone wasn't questioning, it was accusatory. "Audrey, there must be a mistake on this invitation," she began, her voice tight. "It says no children. Obviously, that doesn't apply to your own nephews and niece, their family." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Hi, Megan. No, there's no mistake. It's a child-free event for all our guests. The venue has a very strict policy, and honestly, Liam and I just want a more adult atmosphere for the evening." "A strict policy? Don't be ridiculous. You're the one paying them. You make the rules," she scoffed. "And what does adult atmosphere even mean? Are you saying my children are not good enough to watch you get married? They have been looking forward to this. Lily already has a dress she wants to wear." I could already feel the familiar headache forming behind my eyes. This was Meghan's classic tactic, turning a boundary into a personal insult. It has nothing to do with them not being good enough. It's about the kind of event we want to host. It's a late evening, there will be an open bar, and the venue is filled with expensive art. It's not a suitable or safe environment for young kids, especially not for Josh and Caleb. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "So you're banning my children from your wedding," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low level. "You are deliberately excluding my family." "I am not banning them," I corrected, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm setting a rule for the reception that applies to everyone. They are more than welcome at the ceremony. But the reception at the atrium is for adults only. I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but that's our final decision." "Final decision?" she repeated, her voice rising with incredulity. "You don't get to make a final decision that excludes your own blood. What are my kids supposed to do? Just disappear after the ceremony? What am I supposed to do? This is a deliberate slap in the face, Audrey. You've always been like this, thinking your life and your career are so much more important than my role as a mother." The conversation devolved from there, a predictable spiral of guilt-tripping and accusations. She dredged up decade-old arguments, painting me as the selfish, cold-hearted sister who never understood the sacrifices of motherhood. Liam, who had been listening from the other side of the room, walked over and put a supportive hand on my shoulder. He'd seen these arguments play out dozens of times. By the time I hung up the phone, Meghan's final words were ringing in my ears. "You'll regret this, Audrey. Family is supposed to be everything. You're about to find out what happens when you throw yours away." The threat felt both absurd and chilling. It was just a rule about a party, but in Meghan's hands, it was being forged into a weapon. I had no idea then how deep she was willing to cut with it. The days following that phone call were filled with a tense, suffocating silence. I didn't hear from Meghan, which was both a relief and a source of anxiety. I knew she wasn't the type to simply let things go. She was stewing, plotting. Her silence was the eerie calm before a storm. The other shoe dropped a week later, not with a call from Meghan, but from my mother, Helen. My mom was a retired teacher, a woman who had spent 40 years managing classrooms of children with a gentle but firm hand. With her own children, however, that firmness often melted away, especially when it came to Meghan. "Audrey, honey, we need to talk about this wedding situation," she began, her voice laced with a weary disappointment that she had perfected over the years. It was a tone designed to make me feel like a difficult child who had just thrown a tantrum in a grocery store. "Hi, Mom, there's really not much to talk about. Liam and I made a decision about our reception. Meghan is refusing to accept it," I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. "Your sister is very, very hurt," Mom said. "She feels like you're ashamed of her and her children, that you think you're too sophisticated for them now that you're a successful architect marrying a successful engineer." I pinched the bridge of my nose, fighting back a wave of frustration. "Mom, that's ridiculous and you know it. This has nothing to do with being sophisticated. It's about having one evening, just one, that is calm and adult-focused. Is that really too much to ask? Her kids literally destroyed my sofa. They are not well-behaved in environments that require them to be." "They're children, Audrey," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "And they are your nephews and your niece. Family is not something you can just conveniently edit to fit your aesthetic. Your father and I are very disappointed. We raised you two to be there for each other, to support each other. Tearing the family apart over something so trivial is just, it's not what we expected from you." "I'm the one tearing the family apart?" I asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "I set a simple, common wedding rule. Meghan is the one who turned it into a federal case. She's the one who is refusing to compromise. Why am I the bad guy here?" "Because you're the one who can fix it," my father, Robert, said, his voice suddenly joining the call. He must have been on speakerphone. Dad, a retired accountant, was a man of logic and numbers, but when it came to Meghan, all logic flew out the window. She had him wrapped around her little finger. "It is a simple matter of adding 3 names to the guest list, Audrey. It costs you nothing and it keeps the peace. Your refusal is what is causing the problem. It is an illogical position." I was floored. It costs me nothing. It costs me the wedding Liam and I have dreamed of and meticulously planned. It costs me my peace of mind knowing I'll spend the entire night worrying that Josh is going to try to climb one of the sculptures or that Caleb will have a screaming fit in the middle of the toasts. It costs me the right to make decisions about my own life and my own wedding. That isn't nothing. The conversation went in circles for nearly an hour. They refused to see my side, repeating Megan's talking points like they were gospel. They minimized my feelings, dismissed my valid concerns about the kids' behavior, and framed me as selfish and unforgiving. It became painfully clear that Megan had spent the entire week poisoning them against me, crafting a narrative where she was the victim of my cruel, elitist exclusion. The final blow came from my mother. "Audrey, your father and I have talked this over," she said, her voice now devoid of warmth, replaced by a cold finality. "We cannot, in good conscience, support a celebration that deliberately and painfully excludes members of our immediate family. We have given you a week to think about this. If you do not change your mind and extend a proper invitation to Megan and her children, then we will not be attending the wedding. And frankly, it will cause a rift between us that I don't see how we could ever repair." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking. It wasn't just a threat, it was an ultimatum, a declaration of allegiance. They were choosing Megan. They were willing to miss their own daughter's wedding, to sever our relationship, over 3 misbehaved children who couldn't be left with a babysitter for 5 hours. The pain of it was sharp and visceral, like a physical blow. Liam wrapped his arms around me as I began to cry, not quiet tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs. "They're blackmailing you," he whispered, his voice thick with anger. "This isn't about the kids anymore, Audrey. This is a power play. Megan is testing how much she can control you, and your parents are enabling her." He was right. This had escalated far beyond a simple disagreement. It was a battle of wills, and my own parents had just handed Megan the ultimate weapon, their love and approval. That night, Liam and I sat in our living room, the beautiful wedding invitation suite mocked us from the coffee table. We had a choice to make. We could cave, surrender our dream wedding to keep a fragile, toxic peace. Or we could stand our ground, hold onto the day we wanted, and face the devastating consequences of losing my family. With Liam's hand holding mine, I knew what we had to do. We were building a life together based on partnership and mutual respect. Caving to emotional blackmail was no way to lay a foundation. We would have our wedding our way, even if it meant my parents' chairs would be empty. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a strange mix of joy and profound sadness. On one hand, every day brought us closer to the moment we'd say our vows. The final dress fitting, picking up the wedding bands, confirming the floral arrangements. Each of these milestones should have been purely happy, but they were all tinged with the sorrow of my family's absence. I found myself automatically reaching for my phone to send my mom a picture of the bridesmaid dresses, only to remember she wouldn't answer. I'd hear a song on the radio that my dad and I used to love and feel a lump form in my throat. The emotional toll was immense. Liam was my rock, constantly reminding me that we were doing the right thing, that boundaries were necessary, even when they hurt. Our friends rallied around us, their support a comforting balm on a raw wound. True to their word, my parents and Megan went completely silent. They didn't respond to texts or calls. It was as if I had ceased to exist. The part of me that was a daughter and a sister felt hollowed out, replaced by a cold, empty space. I mourned the family I thought I had, even as I prepared to start a new one with Liam. We finalized the seating chart, leaving 2 painful, empty spots where my parents should have been. We wrote our vows, and I struggled to find a way to honor my upbringing without mentioning the people who had chosen to abandon me at such a crucial moment in my life. Then, about 3 weeks before the wedding day, something strange happened. My phone buzzed late one evening. It was a missed call from my mom. My heart leaped into my throat. For a wild, hopeful second, I thought maybe she was calling to reconcile, to say it was all a terrible mistake. But there was no follow-up text, no second call. A minute later, a notification popped up, new voicemail. My hands trembled as I opened it. At first, all I heard was rustling, the sound of a phone being fumbled in a purse or a pocket. It was clearly a pocket dial. I was about to delete it when I heard my mother's voice, muffled but distinct. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking to my father in the background. "Just have to hope it's enough, Robert," she was saying, her voice strained with worry. She said the bank needs the full amount by the 10th or the foreclosure proceedings start. My father's voice was a low grumble in response. "I still can't believe it came to this. All that money from our retirement. I hope we've done the right thing, Helen. Tearing the family apart like this feels wrong." "What other choice did we have?" my mother shot back, her voice rising in frustration. "Megan said it was the only way. She said Audrey wouldn't understand, that she'd just judge her. You know how she is, so focused on money and success. Megan swore this was the only way to get the help she needed without being lectured." A cold dread washed over me, so intense it felt like ice water flooding my veins. Foreclosure? A bank deadline? What were they talking about? My dad sighed heavily. I know, but the deposit is non-refundable now. We've committed. I just can't believe Audrey is forcing our hand like this. If she'd just been reasonable about the wedding, we wouldn't be in this position." My mother's voice softened slightly. "It's not Audrey's fault, not really. Megan is in trouble and we have to help our child. This is what parents do. We'll patch things up with Audrey later. Once Megan's situation is stable, everyone will calm down and we can be a family again." The voicemail ended with the sound of a car door closing. I played it back 3 times, each word sinking deeper, creating a sickening picture. This wasn't about my wedding. Not really. The fight, the ultimatum, my parents' cold shoulder, it was all a distraction, a smokescreen. Megan was in serious financial trouble, and somehow she had convinced my parents that the only way to help her was to wage this war against me. The phrase, "the deposit is non-refundable now," echoed in my head. A deposit for what? What had they committed to that involved our family being torn apart? I felt dizzy, disoriented. The narrative I had been grappling with for weeks, that my family was punishing me for a simple wedding rule, crumbled away, revealing something far more sinister and calculated beneath. My parents weren't just enabling Megan's tantrum, they were her accomplices in some larger scheme I couldn't yet understand. And the most hurtful part was hearing them discuss my perceived selfishness, my supposed judgment, as if it were a proven fact. Megan had not only manipulated them into giving her money, but she had also thoroughly assassinated my character in the process. I saved the voicemail, my finger hovering over Liam's contact information. I needed to tell him. I needed his logical, engineering mind to help me make sense of the nonsensical. The whispers I had heard on that accidental recording were faint, but they spoke of a deep and deliberate deception. My sister hadn't just thrown a fit, she had orchestrated a conspiracy. And my parents, the 2 people who were supposed to protect me, had willingly walked right into her trap. The investigation had just begun. Liam listened to the voicemail 3 times, his expression growing darker with each playback. When it finished for the final time, he set my phone down on the coffee table and looked at me, his eyes filled with a quiet fury I rarely saw. As a civil engineer, Liam's world revolved around facts, stress tests, and load-bearing capacities. He was an expert at identifying weak points in a structure, and he had just identified a catastrophic fault in my family's foundation. "Foreclosure," he said, the word hanging in the air between us. "She told them she was losing her house, that has to be it, and they gave her money, a lot of money, from the sound of it, from their retirement." "But why connect it to the wedding?" I asked, pacing the living room floor. "Why the drama? Why the ultimatum? Why not just ask me for help, or ask them for help privately?" "Because you would have asked questions," Liam said, his logic cutting through my emotional turmoil like a laser. "You're an architect. You deal with contracts, budgets, and financial oversight. If your sister came to you saying she was facing foreclosure, what's the first thing you would have done?" I stopped pacing. I would have asked to see the bank notices. I'd ask for her mortgage statements. I'd want to understand her financial situation to see how I could actually help, not just throw money at the problem. Exactly, he said, nodding. You would have demanded proof. You would have uncovered the truth. Megan couldn't risk that, so she created a diversion. She manufactured a huge emotional fight that had nothing to do with money. She painted you as the cold, unforgiving villain. That way, when she went to your parents for the loan, she could frame it as a secret they had to keep from their judgmental other daughter. She isolated you to control the narrative and get what she wanted without any oversight. It was a brilliant, sociopathic strategy, and it had worked perfectly. My parents, blinded by their protective instincts for their perceived, struggling daughter, had walked right into it. The pain of it was sharp, but it was quickly being overtaken by a cold, rising anger. I had spent weeks grieving the loss of my family, blaming myself in my weaker moments, all while my sister was cashing a check funded by my character assassination. The deposit, I said, remembering the phrase from the voicemail. My dad said, the deposit is non-refundable now. What deposit? I don't know, Liam admitted. It could be anything, maybe part of a loan agreement, but we need more information. We need to know how much they gave her. The thought of prying into my parents' finances felt like a monumental betrayal of their trust, but they had already betrayed mine in the most profound way. My father, the meticulous retired accountant, had always been a stickler for privacy and financial prudence. He had taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 12. He had also, in a moment of paternal trust a few years ago, made me a secondary user on his main online banking portal. In case of emergency, he'd said. He'd shown me how to navigate it so I could help him pay bills if he and my mom were ever traveling or unwell. I had never once used it for anything other than its intended purpose. Until now. That night, with a knot of guilt and determination in my stomach, I logged into their account. Liam sat beside me, a silent, supportive presence. My hands shook as I typed in the familiar password. The main page showed their checking and savings balances. Both looked normal. Then I clicked on the tab for their retirement investment portfolio. My breath caught in my chest. A transaction had been made just 2 weeks prior, a week after my fight with Megan. A withdrawal, a liquidation of stocks. The amount was staggering. $75,000. Oh my God, I whispered, pointing to the screen. Liam leaned in, his eyes widening. They took $75,000 out of their retirement fund. $75,000 was not a loan to catch up on a few missed mortgage payments. That was a life-altering amount of money for 2 retirees on a fixed income. It was new car money. It was down payment on a condo money. It was world cruise money. What could Megan possibly need that much for? My parents had always been comfortable, but not wealthy. A withdrawal of that size would have a significant impact on their future security. My father, the most risk-averse man I knew, would never have authorized such a thing unless he believed the circumstances were truly catastrophic. Okay, Liam said, his voice calm and steady, pulling me back from the edge of panic. We have the what, we know the amount. Now we need to figure out the why. If she's really in foreclosure, there should be public records. We can check the county clerk's office online. For the next hour, we dug through public databases. We searched for Megan's name, her address, any notices of default, any pre-foreclosure filings. We found nothing. Her mortgage was current. There were no liens on her property. She was not, in any way, shape, or form, about to lose her house. The anger I felt before now solidified into something harder, colder. This was not a story of a desperate sister making a bad decision. This was a calculated, premeditated fraud committed against our elderly parents. And she had used my wedding and my love for my family as a tool to execute it. The money wasn't for a house. So where did it go? What was the non-refundable deposit for? As I stared at the screen, at the clean record of my sister's mortgage. Another thought began to form, an idea so audacious, so quintessentially Megan, that it made a terrifying kind of sense. I looked at Liam. She's a part-time real estate agent, I said slowly. She's always complaining about her small house, about not having enough space for the kids. She's always talking about wanting to move into the new luxury development on the other side of town. Liam's eyes met mine, and I could see the same realization dawning on him. Audrey, he said, Check the website for that new development. See what their new build deposit requirements are. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I found the developer's site, a glossy page filled with images of sprawling homes with gourmet kitchens and three-car garages. I clicked on the Purchasing Info tab, and there it was, in black and white. Standard new construction, deposit to reserve a lot and begin building. $75,000. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a sickening finality. Megan wasn't losing her house. She was buying a new one. A much bigger, much more expensive one, using our parents' retirement money as her personal slush fund. She had invented a crisis to fund a fantasy, using my wedding as the emotional leverage to pull it off. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. She had willingly destroyed our family's peace, jeopardized our parents' financial future, and dragged my name through the mud, all so she could upgrade her lifestyle. For a full day, I was paralyzed by rage. I wanted to call her and scream. I wanted to forward the screenshots to my parents with a giant, red-lettered, "I told you so." But Liam, in his infinite wisdom, urged caution. "If you just attack, she'll deny everything," he reasoned, his calm voice a necessary anchor in my storm of anger. "She'll lie. She'll say the money was for something else. She'll twist it and tell your parents you're snooping, trying to control her. You'll look like the villain all over again. We can't just present the evidence. We have to make them see the truth for themselves. We have to set a trap." His logic was undeniable. A direct confrontation would only devolve into a shouting match. We needed a controlled environment. We needed to orchestrate a moment of revelation so undeniable that even my parents, in their state of willful blindness, could not ignore it. The plan we devised was simple, but required me to swallow every ounce of my pride. I waited 2 days, letting my anger cool into a steely resolve. Then, I picked up the phone and called my mother. I pitched my voice to sound small, heartbroken, and defeated. It wasn't hard to do. A large part of me still felt that way. "Mom," I said, letting a slight tremble enter my voice. "It's Audrey." The silence on the other end was heavy, but she didn't hang up. "Yes, Audrey," she said, her tone cold and distant. I've been doing a lot of thinking," I started, hating the words as they came out of my mouth. "And I was wrong. I was being selfish. The wedding, it's just one day. Family is forever. I've been so horrible, and I've ruined everything." I could hear a subtle shift in her breathing. I had her attention. "I know you and Dad aren't coming to the wedding, and I have to accept that, but I can't stand the thought of us being like this forever. Could we please, all of us, just meet one last time before the wedding? I want to apologize. To you, to Dad, and to Megan. I need to try to make things right, even if it's too late for the wedding." There was a long pause. I could hear her muffled voice speaking to my dad in the background. My heart pounded against my ribs. This had to work. "Where would this meeting be?" she asked, her voice still cautious but a degree less icy. "At your house," I said immediately. "I'll come to you. Liam and I'll even call Megan and invite her myself. I need to apologize to her face to face. Please, Mom, just an hour, that's all I'm asking." This was the critical part of the trap. By offering to meet on their turf, I was making them feel in control. By offering to apologize, I was validating the narrative Megan had sold them, lulling them into a false sense of security. They would expect a contrite, defeated daughter, ready to beg for forgiveness. They would not expect an ambush. "All right, Audrey," my mother finally conceded. "We can do that, Saturday afternoon." Next, I had to call Megan. That was the hardest part. I rehearsed my lines with Liam, practicing the right tone of remorse. "Megan," I said when she answered, her voice dripping with smug surprise. "It's me." "What do you want, Audrey?" she asked, clearly enjoying my supplication. "I want to apologize," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I was wrong, completely and totally wrong. I've spoken to Mom and Dad, and we're all meeting at their house on Saturday. I was hoping you'd come too, so I can tell you how sorry I am in person." Her vindicated scoff was audible. "Well, it's about time you came to your senses. Fine, I'll be there. but don't think a little apology is going to magically fix everything you broke. I know, I said softly. I'll see you Saturday. I hung up the phone and took a deep, shuddering breath. The trap is set, I told Liam. We spent the next few days preparing. Liam printed out the bank statements showing the $75,000 withdrawal. I took screenshots of the real estate developer's website with the deposit information clearly highlighted. We also printed a copy of Megan's mortgage payment history from the public county records, showing no missed payments. We put it all into a neat manila folder. It felt like preparing for a legal battle, not a family meeting. On Saturday afternoon, as we drove to my parents' house, the folder sat on the back seat like a ticking bomb. I felt a strange sense of calm. The grief and anger had been distilled into a singular purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my wedding anymore. I was fighting for my parents' future and for the truth. Megan wanted a war. She was about to get one. We walked into my parents' living room, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. My parents, Helen and Robert, were sitting stiffly on the sofa, their faces grim and expectant. Megan was perched in an armchair, radiating an aura of smug victory. She looked me up and down, a faint smirk playing on her lips as if to say, "Look who came crawling back." Liam squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that we were a team. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet with me," I began, my voice steady despite the frantic beating of my heart. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room, forcing them all to look up at me. "I've had a lot of time to think, and I realize I owe you all an apology. I've caused a terrible amount of pain, and I've broken the trust between us." My mother's expression softened slightly. My father nodded, as if to say, "Go on." Megan, however, just crossed her arms, unimpressed. "I am so sorry," I continued, looking directly at my parents, "that I created a life for myself that made you believe I was so judgmental, so unfeeling, that you couldn't come to me when a family member was in trouble. I am sorry that my success has been twisted to look like arrogance, and I am sorry that you felt my sister's only option was to lie." The mood in the room shifted instantly. The smugness on Megan's face vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. My parents exchanged a confused look. This was not the apology they were expecting. "What are you talking about, Audrey?" my father asked, frowning. "I'm talking about the $75,000, I said, my voice clear and strong. The color drained from my mother's face. My father sat bolt upright. Megan's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. "I'm talking about the money you withdrew from your retirement fund 2 weeks ago," I went on, my gaze fixed on my sister. "The money you gave to Megan because she told you she was facing foreclosure and was about to lose her house." How do you know about that?" my mother stammered, her hand flying to her chest. "You left me a voicemail by accident," I said calmly. "I heard you talking about it. About the foreclosure, about how you had to help Megan because I was too judgmental to be trusted. So, I did something you taught me to do, Dad. I did my due diligence." I walked over to the coffee table and opened the manila folder. I laid out the first document, the printout from the county clerk's office. This is a public ray. Court of Megan's mortgage payments. As you can see, she has never missed a single payment. She is not and has never been in foreclosure. That was the first lie. I then laid down the bank statement with the $75,000 withdrawal circled in red. This is the money you took out, a significant portion of your nest egg, money you both worked your entire lives for. Finally, I laid down the screenshot from the luxury home developer's website. "And this," I said, my voice dropping, "is where the money really went. It's the website for the new Willow Creek Estates. You'll notice their required down payment to reserve a new home is a very specific, non-refundable deposit. $75,000. I turned my full attention to my sister, whose face was now a mask of pure fury. "You weren't losing a house, Megan. You were buying one. You invented a crisis, a fake foreclosure to scare Mom and Dad into giving you their retirement money. And you needed a reason why you couldn't come to me, the architect, for help. So you created one. You picked a fight over my wedding. You made me the villain, isolated me from the family, so you could execute this fraud without anyone asking any questions. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by my mother's quiet gasp. My parents stared at the papers on the table, then at Megan, their faces a canvas of dawning horror and disbelief. "That's not true," Megan shrieked, jumping to her feet. "She's lying, she's twisting everything. I had other debts, a loan shark, I was in danger, I had to protect my kids. I was going to pay them back." "A loan shark?" my father asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and rage. "Is that true, Megan? Tell me the truth right now." But her story was already unraveling. The lies were becoming more frantic, more desperate. "Yes, and the house thing was just a cover story, to protect you from knowing how much danger I was in." "So you lied to us," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Whether it was foreclosure or a loan shark you lied, you manipulated us. You took our money under false pretenses, and you turned us against your own sister to do it." "She deserved it," Megan screamed, finally dropping all pretense. Her face was contorted with years of resentment. Miss Perfect Architect with her perfect fiancé and her perfect, child-free life. Looking down on me, judging me, you have no idea what it's like. I deserved a nice house too. I deserved that money more than they did. They're old. What do they even need it for? And there it was, the ugly, unvarnished truth. It wasn't about need. It was about pure, unadulterated entitlement and jealousy. In that moment, my parents saw her for who she truly was, not the struggling daughter they had tried to protect, but a manipulative stranger wearing their child's face. My mother started to weep silently, her shoulders shaking. My father stood up, his face ashen. He looked older than I had ever seen him. "Get out of my house, Megan," he said, his voice cracking. "What?" she sputtered. "Get out," he repeated, pointing toward the door. "And you will pay back every single cent of that money. I don't care how you do it, but you will pay it back. We are done." Megan stared at him, then at my crying mother, then at me. Her expression was not one of remorse, but of pure, venomous hatred. She snatched her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. And then there were three. My parents and I stood in the wreckage of our family, the terrible truth exposed and glistening between us. The aftermath of the confrontation was not a moment of triumphant victory, but one of quiet, profound sorrow. The anger had burned away, leaving behind the ash of broken trust and deep regret. My mother and father were utterly devastated. They sat on the sofa, looking at the papers on the coffee table as if they were evidence from a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. "We were so blind," my mother whispered through her tears. "She's our daughter. We're supposed to know her. How could we not see what she was doing?" My father, the pragmatic accountant, seemed most wounded by the financial betrayal. "Our retirement, Helen," he said, his voice hollow. "I spent 40 years building that for us, for our future, and I just handed it over." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a shame so deep it was painful to witness. "Audrey, I am so sorry. We accused you, we abandoned you. We chose to believe the worst about you because it was easier than believing the truth about your sister. Can you ever forgive us?" Forgiveness felt like a complex, distant concept. My own pain was still too fresh. "I don't know," I answered honestly, my voice gentle. "What you did hurt me more than I can possibly say. Trust is a foundation, Dad, and ours is cracked. We can't just plaster over it. We're going to have to rebuild it, and that's going to take a long time." It was a stark, honest answer, but it was the truth. There would be no magical, tearful reunion that instantly healed all wounds. We had a long and difficult road ahead. But for the first time in months, we were all on the same side of it. We talked for hours that afternoon, laying out all the manipulations, the small lies Megan had told over the years that now seemed like warning signs we had all ignored. My parents confessed they had enabled her for years, always making excuses for her behavior, always bailing her out of small troubles, never realizing they were feeding a monster of entitlement. They asked hesitantly if they could still come to the wedding. Liam and I discussed it privately. It wouldn't be easy to see them there, knowing what had passed between us. But leaving their chairs empty now felt like a punishment that would only prolong the hurt. We agreed they could come, on the condition that this was the first step in a long process of healing, one that would likely involve family counseling. They accepted immediately. Megan, as expected, did not go quietly. She sent a barrage of hateful text messages, calling me a snake and a traitor. She tried to rally other family members to her cause, but when my parents told the unvarnished truth to my aunts and uncles, her support system evaporated. Faced with total isolation and the threat of legal action from our father, she finally agreed to a repayment plan, though it would take her years, if not decades, to repay the full amount. She sold her car and had to take on a second job. Her dream of a luxury home was dead. 2 weeks later, I married Liam in the atrium. The evening was everything we had dreamed it would be: elegant, romantic, and filled with love. My parents were there. It was awkward at times, and there was a palpable sadness lingering beneath the surface of the celebration, but they were there. They watched with tears in their eyes as I walked down the aisle. During the reception, my father came to me, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your mother and I bought you a wedding present," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It felt wrong to just buy something from your registry, so we did this instead." He handed me a folder. Inside was a certificate of deposit. He had taken the first repayment check from Megan and opened a high-yield savings account in my name. "Every dollar she pays back is going in here," he explained. "It's not about the money, Audrey. It's about accountability. It's a symbol that we are committed to making things right." It was the most meaningful gift I could have received. It wasn't just money, it was a promise, a foundation for a new beginning. Today, our life is peaceful. Liam and I are blissfully happy. My relationship with my parents is slowly, carefully being rebuilt. We are in therapy together, learning how to communicate honestly and establish healthy boundaries. I haven't spoken to Megan since that day in the living room, and I don't know if I ever will. Some betrayals cut too deep, and some foundations are too shattered to rebuild. Our family is smaller now, and it bears the scars of what happened. But it's also stronger, more honest, and built not on obligation or illusion, but on the painful, imperfect, and resilient truth.